I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to do something like this. I always saw myself as a good wife, loyal, dependable, the kind of woman who put her family first. But sometimes life has a way of making you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. It all started when my husband, Mark, had knee surgery. He had been a strong, capable man his whole life, always the one to handle things around the house. But after the operation, he was stuck in bed for weeks, unable to do much of anything. That's when Jason, our neighbor's son, started coming around more often. Jason had just finished college and moved back home for a while. He was young, full of energy, always willing to lend a hand. At first, it was innocent. He'd mow our lawn, help me carry groceries, even fix little things around the house that Mark couldn't get to. He was polite, respectful, just a nice kid helping out. But then I started to notice things I shouldn't have. The way he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he always seemed to find a reason to stay just a little longer. And if I was being completely honest with myself, I liked it. It had been a long time since I felt seen like that. Mark and I had been together for over 20 years, and somewhere along the way, we had settled into routine. Love was still there, but the passion, that had faded a long time ago. With Jason, there was a spark, something dangerous, something that made me feel alive again. One afternoon, while Mark was asleep upstairs, Jason came by to drop off a package that had been delivered to his house by mistake. I opened the door and he gave me that same look again, the one that sent a shiver down my spine. "You okay, Mrs. Carter?" he asked, his voice low. I should have laughed it off. I should have thanked him and closed the door, but instead I hesitated. And in that moment, everything started to change.
By the way, if you're curious about what happened next, subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Thank you.
I told myself it was nothing, a silly moment, just my imagination running wild. But that night, as I lay in bed next to my husband, staring at the ceiling while he snored softly beside me, I couldn't shake the way Jason had looked at me. The next day, he was outside working on his car when I went to check the mail. I could have ignored him, I should have, but instead I lingered. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said, wiping grease from his hands. His shirt was stained with oil and the muscles in his arms tensed as he stretched. "Just call me Claire," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled and I felt something deep in my stomach tight. After that, things started shifting in small ways. Jason found more reasons to stop by. Sometimes he'd bring over fresh vegetables from his mom's garden, other times he'd offer to fix something around the house that didn't really need fixing, and I let him. One afternoon, while Mark was watching TV upstairs, I was out back watering the plants when Jason walked over, his hands in his pockets. "You ever get time for yourself?" he asked. I laughed. "Not really." "Why?" he shrugged. "Just seems like you do everything for everyone else." I didn't answer because the truth was he was right. He took a step closer. "You deserve to be appreciated, you know." The words hung between us, thick with something I wasn't ready to name. I swallowed hard. "Jason, this isn't," he reached out, brushing a stray hair from my face. It was barely a touch, but it sent a current through me so strong I had to take a step back. I looked toward the house, my heart hammering. Mark was just inside, my husband, the man I had built a life with, and yet I didn't tell Jason to leave. I didn't stop him when he took another step closer, and I didn't stop myself from wanting more. I told myself I wouldn't let it go any further. That night, I cooked dinner like I always did, sat next to Mark while he watched the news, and went to bed beside him just like every other night. But I felt different. My skin was buzzing, my mind restless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's face, the way he looked at me, the way his fingertips barely grazed my skin but left something behind that I couldn't shake. The next morning, I found myself watching the clock, wondering if I'd see him. And sure enough, just before noon, he was outside, shirtless, washing his car. It was like something out of a scene I had no business being in. The sun glistened on his tan skin, water dripping down his back, his muscles flexing with every movement. I knew he was showing off. And worse, I liked it. I stood at the kitchen window longer than I should have, pretending I was cleaning up when really I was just watching. I nearly jumped when I heard Mark's voice behind me. "Claire, you okay?" I spun around too fast. "What? Yeah, just thinking about what to make for dinner." He nodded and settled onto the couch, his bad knee propped up on a pillow. I glanced back out the window, and that's when I saw Jason looking right at me, smirking just a little. My stomach tight, and I turned away quickly, my face burning. This was dangerous, I knew that. But I also knew that I liked the attention more than I should. That evening, I was in the backyard, pretending to check on the tomatoes in our little garden when I heard the gate creak open. My breath caught as Jason stepped inside, hands in his pockets, looking far too casual for what I knew was about to happen. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice low. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, glancing toward the house. He took another step, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of cologne and summer air on his skin. "Then tell me to leave." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to. I had spent years being responsible, being the good wife, doing everything I was supposed to do. And here was this young, confident man standing in front of me, looking at me like I was the most desirable woman in the world. I swallowed hard. Jason, his fingers grazed my wrist, the smallest touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity straight through me. "I think about you," he murmured. I should have pulled away. I should have told him this was wrong, that we couldn't do this. But instead, I let my eyes close for just a second, let myself sink into the warmth of the moment. That's when I heard the sliding door open. Mark's voice cut through the air. "Claire, you out here?" I yanked my hand back like I had been burned, stepping away from Jason so fast I nearly stumbled. He was already moving toward the gate, disappearing into the night like nothing had happened. but something had. And I knew deep down this was only the beginning. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason, his hands in his pockets, that look in his eyes, the way his voice had dipped just enough to make my stomach tight. I lay next to Mark, staring at the ceiling, feeling my heart pound harder than it should have. I had been so close to crossing a line I could never take back, and yet the only thing I could think about was how much I wanted to see him again. The next morning, I told myself I'd stay away. I kept busy cleaning the house, running errands, anything to distract myself, but it didn't work. By late afternoon, I was restless, packing, finding excuses to glance out the window. I told myself it was just curiosity, nothing more, but deep down I knew better. Just as I was about to force myself to go upstairs and sit with Mark, my phone buzzed. I wasn't expecting a message from anyone, so when I saw Jason's name on the screen, my stomach flipped. "You free?" It was simple. No games, no pretense, just a question I already knew the answer to. I hesitated, staring at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then before I could talk myself out of it, I typed back. "For what?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Meet me in the garage, 5 minutes. My pulse was a steady thrum in my ears as I set my phone down. My hands felt clammy, my breathing a little too shallow. I could hear the TV upstairs, the sound of Mark flipping channels like he always did when he was bored. He trusted me completely. He never asked where I was going, never questioned anything. I swallowed hard. I should have ignored the message. I should have stayed inside, focused on my husband, on my life. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out the back door. Jason's garage was open just enough for me to duck inside. The air smelled like motor oil and something else, something warm and familiar. He was leaning against his workbench, arms crossed, watching me with that same look that had been making my stomach twist for days. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice low. "I shouldn't have," I admitted. He pushed off the workbench, closing the small space between us in a way that felt effortless, like he belonged there, like this was inevitable. "Then why are you here?" I opened my mouth to answer, but I didn't have one. At least not one that wouldn't sound like a lie. He reached out, tracing a single finger down my arm, slow, deliberate. "Say the word, Claire. If you don't want this, I'll walk away. But if you do..." His voice trailed off, thick with something unspoken. I took a shaky breath, knowing this was the moment, the last chance to stop, to turn around and pretend like nothing had ever happened. But I didn't move. I didn't say no. Instead, I closed the distance between us. And just like that, I crossed the line. The second his lips touched mine, I felt something crack open inside me. It wasn't just about the kiss, it was about everything leading up to this moment. The stolen glances, the quiet tension, the way he made me feel like a woman again, not just a wife, not just someone's caretaker. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I let him. I didn't resist, I didn't think, I just let myself feel. The heat between us was instant, overwhelming. His hands were firm but careful, like he was savoring every inch of me. I wasn't used to being touched like this anymore, with hunger, with intention. Mark and I had been together for so long that everything had become routine, predictable. With Jason, nothing about this felt safe. And that's exactly why I couldn't stop. His lips moved down my neck, his breath warm against my skin. I tilted my head back, letting out a shaky exhale as my fingers found their way to his hair. Every inch of me was burning, desperate for more. I knew I was making the biggest mistake of my life, but in that moment, I didn't care. I didn't want to think about consequences, about Mark, about what this would mean when it was over. I just wanted to be wanted. Then out of nowhere, a noise cut through the thick silence, the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming shut. My stomach dropped. Jason pulled back instantly, his hands still gripping my waist, his chest rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, panic seizing my throat. He nodded, his eyes darting to the slightly open garage door. Through the small gap, I saw the shape of a man walking up Jason's driveway. My heart nearly stopped. "Mark." I shoved Jason away, my entire body trembling. Oh my God. "If he sees me," Jason reacted fast, grabbing my hand and pulling me deeper into the shadows of the garage, pressing his body close to mine. "Stay quiet," he murmured. I held my breath as I heard Mark's voice outside. "Jason, you out here?" My pulse was pounding in my ears. I felt dizzy, trapped between the heat of Jason's body and the icy realization of what I had just done. What I was still doing. Jason stepped away from me, smoothing his shirt as he moved toward the garage door. He pulled it open a little more, just enough to make it seem like he had nothing to hide. "Hey, Mr. Carter, what's up?" I flattened myself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. "Have you seen Claire?" Mark asked, his voice casual. "She said she was stepping out for a minute, but I haven't heard from her." Jason didn't hesitate. "Nah, haven't seen her. Everything okay?" Mark sighed. "Yeah, just wondering where she went. She's probably inside. I'll check again." The moment I heard his footsteps fade, I let out a shaky breath, my whole body weak with relief. Jason turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "You should go," he said quietly. I nodded, my mind racing. I had just risked everything, nearly got caught, and yet as I slipped out of the garage and hurried back home, my heart wasn't filled with guilt. It was filled with the unbearable, undeniable truth. I wasn't done with Jason. Not yet. I barely made it inside before my legs started to shake. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, trying to steady myself before stepping into the house. The living room was exactly as I had left it, Mark's recliner, the muted hum of the TV, the scent of the dinner I had barely touched earlier. Everything looked normal, but Mark was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. He turned when he heard me come in, his brow furrowing slightly. "Where were you?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Just out back, checking the garden." He nodded, taking a sip. "You didn't hear me calling you." I shook my head, walking past him toward the sink, hoping he wouldn't notice the way my hands still weren't steady. "No, must have been too far back by the fence." He shrugged, accepting my answer without a second thought. Just like that, no suspicion, no questioning. My stomach twisted, not from guilt, but from how easy it was to lie. That night, I climbed into bed beside him, just like I had done every night for over 20 years. He fell asleep quickly, just like always. And I lay there in the dark, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second in that garage. The weight of Jason's hands on me, the heat of his breath against my skin. The way I had wanted him more than I had wanted anything in a long time. I should have been ashamed. I should have felt disgusted with myself. Instead, all I felt was restless. Hungry for more. The next day, I told myself I wouldn't see him. I'd keep my distance, pretend like nothing had happened. But by noon, I was outside again, watering plants that didn't need watering, pretending not to look toward his house. When I finally saw him step outside, his shirt slung over his shoulder, his gaze met mine instantly, like he had been waiting. My breath caught in my throat. I turned quickly, heading back inside before I could do something stupid. But before I closed the door, I heard my phone buzz from the kitchen counter. "Jason, come by, same place." I stared at the message, my heart slamming against my ribs. This was insane. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it. Instead, my fingers hovered over the screen before I typed back, "Meet 10 minutes." I was already walking toward the door before I even hit send. Jason was waiting for me in the garage, leaning against his workbench, looking so damn sure of himself. I should have hated how easily he got to me. Instead, I wanted him even more. "You're playing with fire," I murmured, stepping inside and shutting the door behind me. He smirked. "I know." And when he pulled me to him, his hands sliding down my back, his lips finding mine like he had been starving for me, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't planning on stopping. I lost track of time in Jason's arms. Every touch, every stolen moment felt more dangerous, more addictive. We didn't talk about what we were doing or where it was leading. We just let it happen. His hands explored me like he had every right to, and I let him, melting into his touch, his warmth, his hunger. When I finally pulled away, breathless and unsteady, I realized how deep I had already fallen. This wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It wasn't something I could shrug off as a lapse in judgment. I wanted him again and again, and the worst part, he knew it. "Same time tomorrow," Jason murmured, brushing his fingers along my wrist. I hesitated only for a second. Yes. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secrecy and stolen moment. I became an expert at sneaking around, late-night text, quick encounters in the garage, a lingering touch when no one was watching. Every time I swore it would be the last. And every time I found myself coming back for more. At home, nothing changed. Mark was the same, kind, predictable, trusting, and I hated myself for how easy it was to keep lying to him. But at the same time, I felt more alive than I had in years. I stopped caring about guilt, stopped questioning if this was wrong. It was already too late. One evening after Mark had gone to bed early, I stepped outside for some air. Jason was already waiting for me in the shadows of his backyard. He pulled me close the second I reached him, his lips at my ear. "I don't like sneaking around like this," he murmured. I tensed. "We don't have a choice." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes darker than usual. "What if we did?" My stomach twisted. "Jason, I'm serious." His grip on me tight. "What if we stopped hiding? What if you left him?" I felt the air rush out of my lungs. Leave Mark? The thought had never fully formed in my mind before. This was just an affair. A secret indulgence. It wasn't supposed to be real. But now, standing in Jason's arms with the heat of his body pressed against mine, I realized something terrifying. He wanted more, and the scariest part, a small, reckless part of me was starting to wonder if I did too. I barely slept that night. Jason's words echoed in my head, looping over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. What if you left him? I had never let myself think that far ahead. This wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was passion, excitement, a secret that existed in stolen moments, never meant to leave the shadows. But now Jason was pulling it into the light, asking me to face something I wasn't ready for. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. I made Mark his coffee, folded his laundry, answered his questions with distracted nods. He didn't notice anything was wrong. He never did. That afternoon, Jason texted me. "We need to talk." I knew what that meant. He wasn't letting this go. And the worst part, a small part of me didn't want him to. I found myself in his garage again, my back against the closed door, his hands gripping my waist. He didn't kiss me, didn't pull me in like he usually did. Instead, he just looked at me, searching my face for an answer I wasn't sure I had. "I can't keep doing this," he finally said. I swallowed hard. "Jason, I want you, Claire, not just in secret, not just for an hour here and there." His jaw tight. "I want more," I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "You don't love him, not like you used to." I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came out. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Jason's fingers trailed down my arm, slow, deliberate. "Tell me you don't feel something real with me. Tell me you haven't thought about what it would be like if we didn't have to sneak around." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself, trying to find the right thing to say. But when I opened them, Jason was watching me with something raw and unguarded in his expression. "I need time," I whispered. His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he was going to argue, but then he exhaled, nodding once. "Okay, but I won't wait forever." I knew he meant it. And for the first time since this started, I realized I was standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than just an affair. I was running out of time to make a choice. I told myself I needed time, but the truth was I was stalling. Because the second I admitted what I really wanted, there would be no turning back. For the next few days, I avoided Jason. No texts, no stolen moments. I focused on Mark, trying to remind myself why I had stayed with him for all these years. He was a good man, loyal, dependable, but the problem was I didn't feel anything when I was around him anymore. No spark, no excitement, just routine. And now that I had tasted something different, something alive, it was impossible to forget. Late one evening, I was folding laundry when Mark spoke up from his recliner. "You've been quiet lately," he said, not looking away from the TV. "Something wrong?" I forced a small smile. "Just tired." He nodded, accepting my answer without question. That was the problem. He never asked more, never looked deeper, never wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't happy. The next morning, Jason was waiting. Not in his garage, not in the backyard, but right there in my driveway, leaning against his truck like he had all the time in the world. My stomach twisted. He wasn't being careful anymore. He wasn't hiding. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me before Mark could hear. "What are you doing?" I hissed. Jason's gaze was steady. "I told you, Claire, I'm not waiting forever." I glanced toward the house, panic creeping up my spine. "You can't just show up here." "Why not?" His voice was calm, too calm. "You don't seem to have a problem sneaking into my garage every night." I stiffened. "That's different." "No, it's not." He took a step closer, his voice low. "I'm done being your secret." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Jason," he leaned in just close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, the scent of his cologne wrapping around me like a slow trap. "You have a choice," he murmured, "me or him, but you can't have both." A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to tell him I wasn't ready, that it was complicated, that leaving Mark wasn't as simple as just walking away, but I knew Jason. He wasn't the kind of man to wait around while I figured out my feelings. He reached up, brushing a thumb along my jaw, his touch gentle despite the tension in his voice. "I love you, Claire, but I need to know if you love me too." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Love, he had never said that before. And maybe, deep down, I had been pretending this was still just an affair so I wouldn't have to face the truth. But now there was no avoiding it. I had to choose. And either way, someone was going to get hurt. I stood there frozen, my mind racing, my heart slamming against my ribs. Jason's words hung in the air between us, impossible to ignore. "I love you, Claire," no hesitation, no fear, just a simple truth. One that demanded an answer, but I didn't have one. Not yet. I swallowed hard, glancing back toward the house. Mark was inside, probably flipping through TV channels, completely unaware that his wife was standing outside with another man, her pulse racing for all the wrong reasons. Jason exhaled, his patience wearing thin. "Claire, I need to know." "I can't," I stopped myself, shaking my head. I need time." His jaw tight, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, not desire, not confident, but something closer to doubt. "Time for what?" His voice was quieter now, rougher. "To go back to pretending you're happy, to keep playing house with a man you don't love anymore." I flinched. "That's not fair." He let out a bitter laugh. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn simple. You either want me or you don't." I wanted to tell him it wasn't that easy, that Mark had been my husband for over 20 years, that leaving wasn't just about breaking a marriage, it was about unraveling a life, a history, a foundation I had spent decades building. But the problem was, Jason was right. I wasn't happy. Not really. And deep down, I knew I hadn't been for a long time. Jason took a step back, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "I can't do this anymore, Claire." His voice was quieter now, like he had already made peace with whatever came next. "I won't be the guy you run to in secret. If you want me, really want me, then prove it." He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned, climbed into his truck, and pulled out of the driveway without another word. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, my mind a mess, my stomach in knots. Because for the first time since this started, I realized I was dangerously close to losing them both. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, moving through my house like a stranger. Every corner of it felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew my secret, as if the air was heavier with the weight of my choices. Mark barely noticed. He sat in his recliner watching the news, occasionally making small talk that I barely responded to. I knew I should have tried harder, but my mind was elsewhere. Jason was gone, not just from my driveway, but from my life, unless I did something about it. And that was the terrifying part, because I wasn't sure if I had the courage to. Late that night when Mark was asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on me. I thought about what my life would look like if I stayed. If I ignored everything I felt for Jason and just kept going as if none of it had ever happened. I would wake up every morning next to a man who loved me, yes, but not in the way Jason did. Not in a way that made my skin burn and my heart race. And for the first time, I asked myself the question I had been avoiding since this started. Is this really enough for me? The answer came too easily. No. The next morning, I woke up with my mind made up. I would tell Mark, maybe not everything, maybe not the details, but the truth, at least part of it, that I wasn't happy, that I hadn't been for a long time, that I needed something different, something more. I expected it to be hard. I expected Mark to fight, to plead, to get angry. But when I sat across from him at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched, my hands shaking slightly as I said the words, he just stared at me for a long time, and then to my surprise, he sighed. "I had a feeling," he admitted, leaning back in his chair. His voice wasn't angry, it wasn't even surprised, just tired. "You've been distant for a while, I just didn't want to believe it." I swallowed, my throat dry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I know, he said simply. Then after a moment, is there someone else? I hesitated, a second too long. Mark nodded slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. Yeah, I figured. A heavy silence settled between us, thicker than anything I had ever felt. There was no yelling, no accusations, no dramatic outburst. Just quiet understanding and maybe, somewhere beneath it all, relief. I don't want to hurt you, I whispered. He let out a breath, something close to a sad laugh. Claire, I think that already happened. For a long time, neither of us spoke, and just like that, I knew it was over. I had made my choice. Now I just had to find out if Jason was still waiting for me. I drove to Jason's house with my heart in my throat. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had made my choice. There was no turning back now, but as I pulled into his driveway, I hesitated. What if I was too late? What if after all of this he had already moved on? Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked toward his front door. My pulse pounded in my ears as I knocked. The wait felt endless. Then finally, the door opened. Jason stood there shirtless, his hair slightly messy like he had just woken up. His eyes widened when he saw me, but he didn't say anything at first, just studied my face as if trying to figure out why I was here. I told him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, something cautious, hesitant. Told him what? I swallowed hard. That I'm leaving. His jaw tensed like he didn't quite believe me yet. For me. I hesitated, not because I wasn't sure of my answer, but because I knew how much weight it carried. For me, I finally said, but I want you to be part of it. He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You're really done with him? I nodded. It's over. For a long moment, he didn't move. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the uncertainty, the way he was fighting between hope and doubt. And then, finally, he reached for me. The moment his hands landed on my waist, I knew I had made the right choice. He pulled me inside, shutting the door behind us, and when he kissed me, it wasn't rushed or stolen or forbidden. It was real. It was ours. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free.
Thank you for watching the video. If you want to hear more stories, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Videos are released every day. Good luck to everyone.